MaJaMa Jams is brought to you by
Paolo.
Yeah, man, so I think Deadpool and Wolverine is actually better than most works of Shakespeare. I don't get any of the hate for it with the lack of plot. Like, honestly, it's better than the Bible.
Well,
you read the Bible? Jesus Christ,
it's pretty boring.
Hey, what happened? Did he see a bowl of pasta again or something? What's going on, Italian, huh?
Oh. It's Mick Garris on our couch. Oh. Mick Garris. He's the director of Psycho 4, Sleepwalkers, and The Stand.
Yep.
He's the screenwriter of Hocus Pocus and Batteries Not Included.
Yeah.
Oh. He's the creator of Masters of Horror.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing?
He's the novelist of Ugly.
Yeah.
Fine. He was the zombie to the right of Michael Jackson's at the end of Thriller.
That's me. Yep.
MaJaMa. MaJaMa.
Welcome back, everyone, to MaJaMa Jams, a show where we discuss other people's work to avoid doing our own. And guys, holy cow, I cannot believe I am telling you this, but today we have been locked in this paper-filled apartment for a little over 3 months because we have finally gotten to episode 100. I cannot believe it, and because of that, we have a very special treat for you guys today. The first guest ever to come on our paper-filled couch, a gentleman who collects accomplishments in the horror world the way Thanos might go around collecting Infinity Stones. Please give it up for the one and only Mr. Mick Garris.
Thank you.
Mick, thank you for coming by and blessing us with your time in this paper-filled world where no one usually dares to come. You're a brave soul.
Congratulations on 100 episodes.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Mick, me and my brother here in this one are, movie nerds, which means as is par for the course, we, the Italian here, as we refer to him on the show.
The Italian stallion.
The Italian stallion.
No, it's just like the Italian.
Oh, okay.
Only after dark.
Yes.
So,
Mateo After Dark, yes.
We don't want to do that. Never.
So many times me and Matthew will alienate our parents by being like, what movie are you quoting? We can talk incessantly almost in that, but there are a couple quotes in our Ellsworth family that we can actually share as a family. And one of our beloved classics we made sure was a tradition to watch on every family camping trip was Hocus Pocus, which I think you might know a little bit about.
I've heard of it.
So I'm thinking about it before this interview, and I suddenly got excited because I'm like, I got a 50-50 chance here because this man is the co-writer. Am I talking to the gentleman that wrote the line?
How many times I gotta tell you? My name ain't Ernie no more. It's Ice. Ice. This is Ice.
Was that you, brother?
I wish it were, and I'm glad it's not. That was part of the punch-up. I did not have the character of Ice in the drafts that I wrote originally. Neil Cuthbert was brought in to do a comedy punch-up on the script, and I believe it was Neil's, although there were 10 other writers besides Neil and myself during the 8 years of development. Just Neil and I were credited, and David Kirshner, who came up with the original idea and who produced the movie.
So one of the things I learned today, which even as a big fan I didn't know, this thing came out, you wrote the original in 1986, is that correct?
Yeah. Yep.
That's crazy. And Mateo was actually telling me that as much of a family-friendly romp as it became, your original script, and you being you, it's much darker, I've heard?
It definitely was darker like my heart. And
that's what we like to hear. That's the gentleman we want on the couch on this show.
Let me play with him. No!
And yeah, it was darker. It was not nearly so broadly comedic.
Was it bloodier? Was it like more of a...
It wasn't so much that it was bloodier, but it was scarier.
Okay.
And the kids were 12 rather than 16. Because to me, Halloween is a much bigger deal when you're 12. And, you know, 16-year-olds are basically beating you up and stealing your candy, rather than being this. They're kind of above Halloween holidays
Right.
and things like that. Whereas 12 years old, you're right in that turning point between adolescence and youth. And, you know, it's a much more powerful day or night, I think. Halloween when I was 12 meant a lot more to me than when I was 16.
Yeah, and to that point, Omri Katz's character in the movie is exactly that, where he's like, oh, God, I got to take my sister out, and he's already over it. So, yeah.
Right.
Plus, 12-year-olds still believe in all that, enough to get wrapped up in it, too.
Yeah, and they're still excited by it. They haven't been jaded by it.
Yeah.
And teenagers, their whole raison d'etre is to be jaded about everything around
It does
them.
come off pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Could you tell us a little about that? That's such a long trip to the screen of basically what, 86 to 93
Yeah,
was.
it was
So
an 8-year wait.
was it just that they kept going through, I know you said that the tone changed, did they keep wanting to change the tone? Were they bringing different writers? They weren't
brought
satisfied?
in a bunch of writers. I was the first writer. I wrote the first 3 drafts of the script. Then I guess, I'm not sure if Neil Cuthbert was next or what, but there were a total of 12 writers on it.
Wow.
And I think it was not a priority project. It was when we started it. We pitched it, everything went great, the studio was excited about it and all that. But when it doesn't happen, people forget about it. And then a new executive will come in and say, oh, we've got this project. Let's bring in somebody else to follow my notes and rewrite it a different way. So after 12 writers, eventually it kind of turned around and came back to what I had originally written, for the most part, other than the age difference and the comedy punch-up. I've got 3 credits on the film because they did go back so much to what I had written, and so many of the other writers were not credited. It goes to an arbitration panel with the Writers Guild, and they decide, without knowing whose names were on each of the drafts, they decide who gets credit on the screen. And so they made the decision that I get first position credit.
Oh, interesting. Very cool. So
Inside poop, yeah.
So you said that the script changed a lot, but a main crux of it is the relationship between the 3 sisters, and kind of after the casting, that real comedic, almost like Three Stooges back and forth. Was any of the main witch volleying back and forth, which, like I said, almost became like a Stooges type thing? Was any of that in your original script?
Oh, a lot of it was.
Okay,
I
so
mean,
it was always the sisters bickering back and
yeah,
forth?
the 3 sisters were very much like the old Warner Brothers cartoon version. You know, they would do cartoons of celebrity parties, and you'd have Bogart and Katharine Hepburn spoofed, and there'd be one body with 3 heads poking each other in the eyes, and that was the Three Stooges. So
that was always the intent to have that, because it
Yeah.
works beautifully because of that chemistry back and
and
forth.
the 3 of them are so good.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the thing that made it stick, is we watch it constantly, and I think the Sarah Jessica Parker's lines of just the idiotic in the background is beautiful.
And she's gorgeous in it, and you know, each of them had a very distinct personality.
Yeah.
And you know, personalities that you can recognize on the page as being developed, rather than, you know, yes, thank God we got those 3 actors to play those parts, and they brought so much of themselves into it, but they were already defined as being quite distinct from one another.
Right, yeah. You were also executive producer. You said you had a couple different roles. You also
I was
executive
co-executive producer.
Co-executive producer?
Bonnie Bruckheimer, Jerry's ex, was the head of development for Bette Midler's company, and I was contracted to get executive producer credit, but they asked me, because there were so many producers, if I would give up and say co-executive producer. So Bonnie Bruckheimer is executive producer, and I'm co-executive producer.
That was nice.
Yeah, so, well, I'm a gentleman.
I put a spell on you. And now you're mine.
Did you have a hand in any of the sculpting and casting then, or was that mostly taken
No,
away?
once I left the project, nobody asked me a thing.
Okay. That was it.
David and I remained very good friends and are to this day. And he would keep me abreast of what was going on, or more likely what wasn't going on. because, like I said, it took 8 years for them to make it. And the only reason that it did finally get made was they got Bette Midler interested.
As usual.
And she was at the height of her film career at that time. And so once she was attached, it was greenlit like that.
It's been interesting to see, and I've always come to it from the aspect of a fan. So as I was reading today, I was like, oh, I didn't realize that it wasn't that critically well reviewed, and it actually lost Disney money.
Oh, it was not a success.
I was actually shocked to look, just because, like I said, to me, it's always been a family favorite. And then as I grew up, it was like, oh, let's put on that old beloved movie. Sometimes you miss. What was it? 93. I was 10. You were younger, so we don't think about that things now. I'm obsessively on Rotten Tomatoes like a friggin' geek. But I looked it up and I was like, wow, I didn't realize that it was kind of mixed reviewed and didn't do well. And then it must have been interesting to see that gestation period, because my God, in recent years with the fan celebrations and the amount of like genuine cult-like love, like I'm thinking of my mom buying a T-shirt of it.
I think in high school I started finding out that every one of my friends was obsessed with it. I'm like, oh, I thought that was just us. Okay, yeah, we watched it for Halloween.
It's a very beloved family thing.
Yeah.
Well, particularly with females. When I go to film festivals or conventions or the like, and people find out that I wrote Hocus Pocus, it's the female contingents from 6 to 60.
Oh yeah.
That have been brought up on it, and when it went to television, when it went on the Disney Channel, then later ABC, and then ABC Family, which became Freeform, and it just became a staple of that. That's when it became hugely successful. I mean, in ways that I never imagined would happen to anything that I ever had anything to do with. Yeah.
It feels like a Halloween staple. Like
Yeah,
it's a one on the checklist you got to go through every year.
Yeah,
That's
now
what
on
I'm saying is-
Freeform, like in October, every night in October,
It almost, yeah.
it airs, and on Halloween, it's 24 hours of
You
Hocus
guys are now
Pocus
officially
back-to-back.
the version of A Christmas Story.
Damn, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
You're the Halloween
Yeah.
A Christmas Story.
Or we're the Twilight Zone of
Yep.
Yeah, right.
Thanksgiving.
New Year's
Yeah,
Eve,
yeah.
exactly.
Just like this.
We now return to MaJaMa.
Thank you, Max, for that marvelous introduction.
So it's interesting with that, Mateo, my buddy here, he's actually had some time in the trenches in the industry, and obviously you have been so deep in the industry in your career. Me and my brother still kind of feel like wannabes. We had our movie we did with them, Bad CGI Sharks. That gives me a little drop in the bucket that feels like I've done
And I
something.
see all the ideas that
Yes.
are cast aside. Yeah.
This is our scattered pseudo-career behind it, all this stuff here.
There's got to be something in there that's worthwhile.
Before you typed it into the computer.
Yeah, we're still trying to figure out how to turn it on. That's the problem. And so we're just like, but
I'm always curious, because I feel like the attitude of people who have been established and made it, you'll ask them about these big beloved projects, and usually they'll say they're happy about it, but it's a very leveled answer. It's it's the professional answer. So I was curious what it's like to have, especially something you said like the rest of us, you probably don't expect that. What it's like to see it mutate like that into something of such a cultural love, and just like you said, it means something to women, to families.
Do you enjoy being alive?
Most of the time.
I can't tell you how embedded it is in our family. So is it strange? Is it surreal? Do you kind of move on from it? It's just another part of the job. Like, what does it feel like to have it mutate into such a beloved thing
Well,
like that?
because it's annual, that Halloween rolls around and Hocus Pocus comes with it every year, and it's bigger. It's like a snowball getting
Right, it just
increasing
continues
in
to grow.
size. And I've learned to really love it. When I first saw the movie, I was disappointed, frankly, because it was so much more broad, and I thought it could have been more creepy and more effective in a darker way. But I've grown to love it. Disney obviously made the right choices because it has been so embraced by the audience. So writers in particular, because if they're not directing or producing or controlling the material, they're going to have other people's input override their own. Once you leave a project, you're replaced by other people to do it and improve upon it, or at least, every executive
Ruin it.
It's the doggy-doo theory, where every executive lifts its leg to put their yellow stain on the script. But
Very visual way of putting it.
yeah,
Look at this piss-stained script, everyone. This is what we've done.
look at the color of these pages.
Right? This wasn't yellow legal paper before the executives got through with it.
a couple of white sheets here and
Then,
there.
yeah. That's pretty cool.
But when you see how it affects people, and to realize that so much of it did come from myself, you know, it takes a village, as they say. It's so many people. It's so collaborative, an art form or entertainment form. But I've come to love it and embrace it, and have for years. And
Is it a tradition for you guys to watch it in your family?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's
And
awesome.
usually, it's nice to see it in a theater.
Oh yeah. Actually, we caught the re-release. What was it, last year?
yeah.
We were very excited
every
to go back
year
and see it in the theater.
They put it at the El Capitan and other places, you know, and it's a pretty special experience. But I don't want to be like Christopher Lee was, who resented playing Count Dracula, that's the only thing people think of him for. So if you have something that makes an audience happy, how can you not embrace that and find joy in that?
I love that answer. I love that answer, dude, because I'm all about the rampant enthusiasm. I don't know. Like I said, people always seem like, okay, that was a good thing, but I feel like the answer is always leveled. So that's a very cool answer. I'm curious, I assume with the way you've talked about how you're off the project and it kind of goes away, they didn't contact you at all for the sequel, and have you seen the sequel?
I did see the sequel, and no, they did not contact me.
I kind of figured
at
that with the
all.
way you were
Yeah.
talking. What does Mr. Mick Garris think of the sequel? And then we'll tell you what we thought of it.
Well, you know, it's different. It didn't try to do the same thing. It was very much, you know, we loved the girl power idea that was in the original, the three sisters and Danny being heroic and the little girl and all. And it seemed to be more of a marketing tool than a movie to me, you know, and I'm not going to be churlish and give a negative opinion of it, because it wasn't made for me. You know, I'm 72 years old and I have a penis, you know, so you know, it's made for the 12-year-old girl in every, mostly female, obviously made for the male audience as well, but it was written by a woman and directed by a woman, and that was a very specific choice on the studio's part. They wanted it to be written by and directed by women, which was a fair deal, even though the original was not.
I say into tie, alpha maybe up and die. In come a Koriyama, hey, hi, come on, baby, up and die.
Well, it's interesting because my mom bought and I think really loved the novelization, which comes with both the novelization of the first movie and then a sequel to, which I assume you're aware of, or no?
I haven't read it, but
Okay, so I
I know
believe
it's out there.
she
Yeah.
said in the second one it does follow all of our characters. What's Henry Katz's character's name? I'm blanking on it. Max. Follows Max, and I think it even has Jay, the long-haired punk, as the principal of the school. So she kind of really liked that they continued with the characters, and I think that we get our three witches back to great effect. You know, they keep clicking like a team, but I was intrigued that they it makes sense that you said it's become a big thing for women, so let's double down on that, have the female friends, but I was a little interested that they didn't choose to bring any of the other characters back, just to kind of, especially because the novelization sequel had that. It's also interesting to wonder who they booked for that, and if that writer just had like carte blanche, like, okay, you create what you want for the sequel. But I thought that was kind of an interesting, again, not
knowing
necessarily.
Disney, they did not say you create what you want.
Of course, how naive of me to think that about that.
Just go, have fun, tell a story.
But
You know what?
again,
We're not
I
here to
would-
stick fingers in the pie. You run free. Art is art.
Art, yeah, be an artist. We want your vision, not ours.
Right.
Yeah. That's what they're famous for.
My favorite feeling.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know who guided it, and David was still involved in the sequel, but not in the same creative sense. He didn't give it the new story and all of that, but he was involved because he had to be. He was the guy who originated it in the first place. So he's a credited producer, and we went to a screening of it together right before it came out. Originally, it was going to be theatrical.
Interesting.
But it was very smart because, you know, what's going on with all the streaming channels and how much trouble they're having maintaining their audience and their subscribers. It was the highest rated streaming movie of all time, Hocus Pocus 2.
Really?
And Hocus Pocus 3 is in the works now.
Yeah.
I heard that. Yeah.
Same cast, as far as you know?
I don't know.
I'm off it. Look, I'm just here I gave you guys that. Just leave me alone about it.
You've sapped my magic. I'm sorry.
Right?
Suck me dry.
You used me up and spat me out.
Disney just chomping on people. My
That's it.
gosh, my God.
Uh-oh, Winnie.
We now return to MaJaMa.
Charles.
So changing pace and register, you are the director, I believe, who has adapted more Stephen King work and
So
for
far, that's true.
both television and
Record holder.
Yeah.
And we've got the stand. This guy's actually old enough to
Yes.
have
the laser
Laserdisc. I didn't even know the word.
Awesome.
Yeah, that big CD thing.
And you did the first movie that he actually wrote for the screen.
Right. Right. He had
Sleepwalkers.
written.
A creep show. So this
He'd written Creepshow, but yeah, this was his first
the first original story. that-
screenplay. Yeah.
How did you connect with him, and also how, and if memory serves, which probably doesn't, but you
Andropause.
you physically met him for the first time on the set of Sleepwalkers for the,
Yeah.
and how, knowing that is Stephen King. Yeah, I know. Well, so he can start talking and we can just like, how is the relationship with? Do you tell him what you're planning to do? Or does he give you ideas? How is
He was great. I got the job the same way people get jobs directing movies for studios. I met with the studio, told them what my approach would be. Had a meeting with 2 or 3 studio executives. We had lunch, and with the line producer of the movie, which normally isn't attached before the director is, but in this case he was. And they said, "We love you for this. We have to meet with another director because his agent, we have a relationship with them, and we have to meet." And they hired the other director. And the other director started rewriting Stephen King.
Ooh.
And you don't get Stephen King's name in the title of the movie if he doesn't like the movie. And he started writing about a planet of sleepwalkers and all kinds of weird stuff that had nothing to do with what King had written. And because I'm a writer as well, months later, they called me in for another meeting. And I thought, I don't know what this is about. And so we had a really nice lunch at the commissary at Columbia Pictures, Sony Pictures. And they said, "Okay, we want to move you into your office now. Here's your key." And I said, blah, 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 blah. What? I had no idea that's what was taking place that day. And I started pre-production that day.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't meet Steve until well into the process, but we would talk on the phone regularly. My job, because I was a writer as well as a director, was to bring it back to Stephen King land, as well as address the notes that Gardner is going to be on here, but
Yes.
He's part of the show.
When our audiences come, he comes in sometimes, gives commentary on the film.
oh, that's good.
Blows paper around.
But they wanted notes addressed, and I was able to do that. And I would call him and say, "This is what the studio wants, and I'm going to do this," or for example, there was another scene where the scene in front of the mirror, where it's mother and son in bed and you see them reflected as the sleepwalkers. That was a scene that I wrote and contributed to it, and that he was great with. But usually I would say, we're looking for a scene that does this. Do you want me to handle it? And almost every time he would say, "No, let me take a crack at it." And the next morning there'd be 6 pages in the fax machine.
Yes.
And they were great. And so it was a really terrific experience working with him. He had his humility was fantastic. He had no massive ego issues with notes from the studio. It was very collaborative. And then when we shot the scene with all the cameos with Tobe Hooper and Clive Barker and King, he came out for 2 hours, was the only time window we had. That morning, eating my granola at Craft Services, I broke a crown.
Oh.
And had to go to get emergency dental work done before. Hurry up, Stephen King is coming to my
God,
set.
those hard granola bars, man. Jesus.
It was nasty.
Buddy. Yeah? Listen, it's not my fault.
And so we met on the set. And he also met Tobe Hooper, who had done The Mangler, but they hadn't met before.
Oh, really?
And then he met Clive Barker, whom he had never met before either. And he had made Clive's career with the quote on Clive's Books of Blood, "I've seen the future of horror and his name is Clive Barker." And that made the Books of Blood hugely successful all around the world. And it kicked off Clive's career as a novelist and later as a filmmaker.
Okay, don't talk to me. Talk to the sheriff.
Well, that's a hell of a moment. What was that like on set to have you just like, I got horror icons left and right meeting for the first time? That's crazy.
It was so much fun. And, you know, I love being in the middle of that sort of thing, introducing people to each other and, you know, putting together the Masters of Horror dinners, which led to the TV series. Just being able to bring together a community that is the gutter community, that, you know, we are the people who don't get respect at film festivals,
we know about that.
Yes, awards festivals, that sort of thing. You know, we are the bastard stepchildren, and so it's really nice. In fact, in a week and a half, I'm going to England. I've put together the first Masters of Horror UK dinner that we're going to do when I'm there. Yeah.
So exclusive news.
Yeah, this is the first time I've talked about it.
Boom, MaJaMa Jams exclusive. Bumping up from a bunch of nobodies to still nobodies,
Yes.
but the thing for Mick.
So it's going to be revamped. Is it going to be a Master of Horror UK?
It's just a dinner. Yeah,
Still.
it's just social, but with some really great people who I really admire, and some of them I already know, and a handful of them I don't. It's a much smaller scale. The last Masters of Horror dinner we had, which was to honor the late, great Tobe Hooper, who was one of my closest friends. There were 35 directors in that dinner. If there had been a bomb dropped on that restaurant,
you killed the horror world.
Never another good horror movie. Just a bunch of shitty ones, yeah.
Then you did the Stand,
Yeah.
which you shot on 6 states across. They don't do this.
6 states, yeah, it was 6 states. It was 100 days shooting. There were 126 speaking parts, 195 scripted locations.
Oh my God.
They don't do these things anymore.
Well,
then it would be, okay, it's a green screen 1, green screen 2, green screen 3.
Well, you know, when they remade The Stand in 2020, it was all shot in Vancouver or in British Columbia, and mostly on stages. And it was like, how do you shoot an epic about crossing the country in one place?
I forgot they even did a remake.
Yeah, CBS All Access, which is now Paramount Plus.
I gotta sign up for it.
Yeah, it's on there.
There got to be streaming service number 8 that we have.
I have a cameo in it.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, and speaking of remake, you made The Shining, which...
That wasn't a remake.
Okay, so look, I got to tell you, I have been incredibly geeked to have you on here because a couple episodes back, this Drew dropped a bomb, which I'm like, okay, that has to be discussed. I forget what we were talking about, but he brings up, which I know also shares Stephen King's opinion. Mateo's like, Kubrick was a master, but not necessarily at horror, and I don't think The Shining works as a horror movie. You always bring up the scene, which I believe, again, is King's example, dissatisfied with, of the all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, and we cut to the reveal far away. And so I was like, Mateo, I feel like you simply can't not say The Shining is not an effective horror movie. We don't dig into it on our movie nerd show, and I've been begging him to do the episode. Then I find out Mr. Mick Garris, who directed King's remake, which I believe was done specifically because famously of his dissatisfaction was that was coming on. I just rented it. We rewatched the whole thing. Again, I remember when I saw it, I was lucky enough to have the book fresher in my mind, so I was blown away by how reverent it was. And man, I don't even know where to start because I was so geeked to have you on here.
King wrote the screenplay, so that's one good reason.
I guess just, what are your thoughts on that? The process of King, was most of The Shining done because of King's dissatisfaction with it? I also think it's interesting that the medium of a TV series gives a longer format, so Shining's 4.5 hours, even with the Kubrick being at 2, that gives you 2.5 to breathe. So in general, I think that may be the medium. So from the man who helmed the Stephen King version, do you have any thoughts on the two of them, or any comments on how much King was dissatisfied, how much that led to it, any process?
I've never talked about this before.
Just say no, it'll be just easier that way.
Just Jason,
there was going to be a link underneath it to all the discussion.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was quite well known that King never liked the Kubrick film because it's one of King's most personal books. You know, it's about a guy struggling with alcoholism who feels the burden of guilt for having badly harmed his little boy because of being under the influence of alcohol and trying to be the better man. And all of that was thrown away and turned into a Twilight Zone by Kubrick. Now, when I saw a screening, this is 15 years before I ever made it, and well before I was ever a filmmaker in 1980 when they screened it at Warner Brothers 3 days before it came out, and I went to the screening. And I'd never been looking forward to a movie so much in my life. I think it's the scariest book I've ever read. It's a great book. Kubrick, one of our greatest filmmakers of all time. And when I saw the movie, I couldn't have been more disappointed.
Wow, okay.
You know, and people your age don't realize every review was terrible. All the reviews for that film, you remember.
Of Kubrick's?
I remember.
Of the Kubrick film,
Yeah.
the review.
Well, okay,
if you
this
go
is-
back and look at contemporary reviews, now I now think it's a great Kubrick film, but I think it's a terrible King adaptation. And I prefer the book. The book is genuinely scary.
Just like pictures in a book. That was.
And when I saw the movie in 1980, I didn't think it was scary at all, and nobody at the screening did either. But it was embraced by young people because of the whole relationship with the father-child thing, and not knowing what a father is capable of, and the schism between childhood and adulthood. It really resonated even in 1980 and made it a big hit movie. But it was not well reviewed. If there had been a Rotten Tomatoes, it would have gotten a splat.
Wow.
You know,
Genuinely, massively interesting fact. He's right. For my young ass, I had no idea. That's amazing
well,
to me.
look up the contemporary reviews and whether you agree with them or not. And I don't in a lot of ways because I admire the artistry of Stanley Kubrick so much. And you can see all of his fingerprints everywhere. But what you don't see are the fingerprints of Stephen King, who created it as something that was massively personal and emotional to him.
Yeah, I guess so.
This is, you know, Kubrick's not known for emotion.
Yes. That's
In fact,
very cold, static shots. Effective, but yes. Very...
yeah. That's what I say when comparing Kubrick and King. Kubrick is cold and King is warm. King is very much about the internal and about the humanity and about the emotions. And Kubrick's are very detached and clinical.
Well, you know, something I found interesting is I think one of the biggest critiques I've heard from you and from many others, I looked up some, little Rolodex reviews. A lot of people are like, Jack Nicholson's great.
Okay.
He starts off the movie insane. Like we're supposed to have a gradual descent, and the way Nicholson's kind of always the Jack face,
Yep.
he kind of starts that way. Do you also share that opinion that we get a little too quickly to the madness with the Kubrick version?
He starts crazy and gets crazier. And I remember having this conversation with David Cronenberg, who said the problem with The Shining is that they cast the ending. So you've got the actor from the ending, from the beginning all the way through. Yeah.
And
I don't know what's going to possibly happen in this abandoned cabin.
Yeah.
We now return to
MaJaMa.
Daddy, I didn't go in the.
Men follow the rules. Okay.
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 And we appreciate even more now that we can, beside seeing it from many years, but the Steven Weber's characterization of Jack Torrance.
That was my next thing.
It's wonderful.
He
He
is
just starts
so
like
good.
every man and just descend with small touches and everything.
Dude, that was
Yeah.
probably the thing I took away most from. We just watched it like a week ago, and I was like, my God, what, love it or hate it, Jack Nicholson's performance is so iconic. How could you go away from it? And I remember thinking this the first time I watched it. I was like, I love Steven Weber as this casting. There's just something about him that I think it's the biggest strength of the movie, that Steven Weber just seems fantastic. Like I said, he
Well,
almost...
you love him, and you love his attempt to try and make things right.
Yes, and in fact, that's what most of the reviews said, is that, look, you guys have to understand. I found it was mostly fair. I just did a peruse, I think, of the IMDb ones, but I found that people were mostly fair of giving their accolades to both. That people kind
There's a lot of haters against.
Oh, absolutely, a lot of haters
against
but
the TV version.
I do feel like
it's television. Oh my God! And it was done by Kubrick perfectly.
That was in there, but I do feel, I did see a lot of people saying, look, I think both have their own ilk, and if you guys love the book more, you probably like the Mick version more. But yes,
we can call it the King version. That's okay.
Well, that was my next question.
Scratch that.
Yeah.
Like you said, this story was very personal, and I know King was very vehemently against the Kubrick version. Was there a lot of collab between you two? Was his presence very heavily felt in the production?
No, what was great was he was on set for probably 2/3 of the shoot.
Oh.
He was around, if not physically on the set. He was in town and there. But he's never, because I've done so much King, a lot of people think I'm his bitch. And that I do his
All right,
bidding.
Mick, get in here.
Yeah, I do his bidding. But there's never been one moment where he ever told me what he thought I should do. I have asked him his opinion. If you have Stephen King as a resource on your set for most of your shoot, and you don't talk to him about creative choices, then you're a fool. And so we had become friends during and after The Stand. We got very close, and by the time we were doing The Shining together, we were really good friends. And it was so wonderful. Plus, Weber being a huge King fan, and we had lots of trouble casting The Shining. Nobody wanted to step into Jack Nicholson's shoes, knowing the first line of every review was going to be, so-and-so is okay, but he's no Jack Nicholson.
That's swell.
That didn't turn out to be the case, but that's what you would expect to be the case. So we had actor after actor that we would pursue, and we met with some of them, and the closest we got to casting was British actors who don't have a snobbishness about the difference between TV and movies that there was in the 90s that there isn't today. And one British actor, we actually cast him, and he never showed up for fittings or anything. We'd try and call him, and just dead zone. Even his agent couldn't reach him about it. And it was just like we got ghosted by this actor.
Pun intended.
Yes. And Weber, we had him in 3 days before shooting started, and King said, if this doesn't go well, I'm pulling the plug. We're not going to make this. And he was right to say that.
And since then, everything's been rosy.
No, not rosy. Bearable.
But Weber came in and read for us, despite him being the star of a hit TV series. But it was a sitcom.
Wings, correct?
Wings, yeah. And, normally you don't read a star of a series or you just trust that they're going to do a good job. But Weber was better known as a comedic actor, and he's one of the funniest human beings on the planet. To this day, he cracks me up every time I see him. But he read with Rebecca, who was cast months before. And he just blew us all away, and we said, we're making this movie. So, and he loves Stephen King and the genre. And this character, he really identified with him, apparently. He'd had a background of dealing with substances that was not too nutritious for him as well. But he totally got it. We were going for the emotional core that King had written. Weber easily connected with that part of it. And, we ended up doing it, and it turned out great. The Stand turned into the highest rated miniseries of all time.
I remember that, yeah.
And The Shining did not do that, but it was a huge hit regardless. It was number 1, 2, and 3 of the week that it aired. So.
I remember. I found out that I have the tape.
Of the actual TV series?
Television,
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
I did record it.
I don't know if you were. Well, I think I watched it live. I forget if you were, but yeah, I was tuned into it.
Well, Shout did a great version of Blu-ray, and even though we protected for 185, they did it in 4:3 for some reason, and it looks great. It really did a good job.
But the one of The Stand is the Blu-ray of The Stand is superb.
Well, what's amazing about that is The Stand was shot in 16 millimeter film and edited on standard definition video because there was no high def then.
Yeah.
This was 1993. And I never thought anybody would ever go back to the negative. And I thought there'd never be a Blu-ray. You know, it's barely high def on it's not high def on DVD. Just looks better than the VHS. But then CBS Paramount went back. They went back to reformatted from the original 16 millimeter negative.
Wow.
Remixed, did everything, and it's beautiful. It looks way better on the Blu-ray than it ever looked before.
It's incredible. Yeah, it looks shot recently.
We screened it a couple of months ago at the Arrow for the Cinematheque, and it looked magnificent. It was really great, and we did get an Emmy for the cinematography.
Hey!
Yeah.
Bring out your dead! The monster's coming! He's coming!
So I'm curious, as a gentleman who's done so many adaptations and worked with the man, whether it's movies or books, do you have a favorite all-time King story?
Well, what's kind of amazing is that I've been able to direct my favorite King books. With The Shining and The Stand are my two favorites. Bag of Bones is one of my favorites. However, the one I wish I'd gotten, the one that got away, was Gerald's Game.
I watched it recently. Yes.
Oh, and if anybody's going to get to do it, thank God it was Mike Flanagan, who I think is brilliant. I think he's one of the best guys out there, and he's a really great filmmaker and great human being. I have nothing but respect for him. We've become really good friends.
I've heard nothing but respect for Dr. Sleep. I just sadly have
Yeah.
not seen it yet, but I've heard amazing things about it.
Oh, that was him too?
Yeah.
Damn, every project he touches, it just knocks it
Yeah, it's just terrific. And in some ways, sorry, King, Steve, but I think Dr. Sleep is an even better movie than it was a book.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's because of expectations. After The Shining, you expect the sequel to The Shining to be really scary, and that's not what it's trying to be.
Right.
It's something very different than a ghost story. It's a very different kind of character story about the son of an abuser, an alcohol abuser, not necessarily a child abuser, although he does break the kid's arm. But just, I think Mike has such a good grasp on emotional depth and resonance, and his TV series that he's done for Netflix, Fall of the House of Usher, and
amazing.
Just great stuff. He's really, if not the smartest, certainly one of the smartest people working in the genre. Certainly now, if not ever. Yeah.
Well, hi there.
Well, speaking of the genre, I was looking at some post-mortem, which, my God, the playlist just reads like the ultimate who's who of just these horror icons.
That's why we're not doing it anymore. We ran out.
You ran out. We got everybody. I was like, my God, I know him. I love him.
Did 150 interviews. Yeah.
Wow.
Wait, 100. We're chugging
almost
along to there.
done. Thank God.
Well, that was over 7 years. We did 280 shows.
My God.
Wow.
Every other show would be the Ask Mick Anything ones where we didn't have a guest. It was.
But you clearly adore this world, are a huge part of this world, have the tentacles out in this world. I feel like in these modern times of the box office failing, one of the, just strong, almost bulletproof things, the horror genre, no matter what's going on, there seems to always constantly be a bunch of horror new releases. I feel like they're always able to keep the budgets low, therefore they're able to turn into profits. Long Legs just recently cracked 100 million globally, which I thought was crazy for Neon. As someone who loves it so much, because I'm always fascinated by this question, I feel like you guys actually are more horror hounds. I definitely have horror ones I love, but I'm always kind of fascinated. What do you think, as someone who loves it so much, is the reason for that bulletproof nature? It feels like it's kind of as impervious to the effects of modern box office. Like the audience will always show up for it.
Well, because they go for a sensation and an experience rather than a movie star. The Marvel movies deliver the same thing every time. You've got big battles and amazing special effects, visual effects, and the good versus evil, however you want to do it. You're going to get the same movie and variations of a theme every time out. Tapping into your fears is something that's universal. Usually if it scares you, it'll probably scare me, although obviously there are exceptions to the rule. It doesn't rely on the size of the film, whereas a comic book movie does. And a drama usually requires movie stars or a rom-com or whatever, that people go for the cult of personality. This is the cult of concept. It's all about a story. And here, I'm going to take you somewhere where I'm going to tap into primal fears that you have and we share. Or take you somewhere you haven't been before, that you're hesitant to go. And I think, there's a huge number of people who don't like horror, and they shouldn't watch it. I'm not going to try and convince anybody.
Yeah, stay the hell home.
Yeah, stay home. But also, horror is more and more being relegated, unless it's franchise horror, which to me is the most creatively bankrupt kind of horror movie. They're not getting theatrical release much anymore. A24 and Neon to the contrary. In general, you don't get independent films of any kind playing at the multiplexes anymore. And when you do, when something like Longlegs is a hit, that's great for us because it means they'll try it again. And it's not based on a book, it's not based on a game, it's not based on any IP, which is all anybody at the studios looks at. So it's the streamers that are saving horror, independent horror in particular, the Shudders and the Netflixes and Hulu and Paramount Plus and Peacock and all these places that if they don't produce the movies, they at least pick them up and give them a platform they wouldn't otherwise have.
You don't waste any time.
We now return to
MaJaMa.
Tootsie, don't cry. The choo-choo train that takes me away from you.
It's interesting the way you put it. It almost feels like, it's such a big conversation. We got into it even with the talks of the studios and Disney and Hocus Pocus, that the battle of art versus commercialism, the way you described it almost seems like the campfire, nature of it almost is able to maintain the purity of what we all, want to believe is idealistic. It's supposed to be about the story and the feelings. It almost seems like by tapping into those visceral feelings, it's able to make, like you said, not IP. What nowadays isn't an IP? What nowadays,
Right.
you talked about, movie stars dependent. It almost seems like the day the movie star is gone and the star now is the IP. Like, okay, Ghostbusters, a Star Wars, that name is the star.
I know those two.
So it almost sounds, it's interesting that it's almost like leapfrogs over and it's able to maintain the purity of what we all, I imagine, would love it and want it to be by appealing to those emotions as opposed to, everything is IP based now.
Yeah, and for a studio, a movie that grosses $30 million isn't worth it to them. A movie that grosses $50 million isn't really worth it to them, even if it only costs them $10 million to make.
Not worth my time either, to be honest.
Yeah. But it's the purity of the idea, and it's the purity, and people want to see something they haven't been exposed to before. And yet they want it to feel genuine, feel real. A lot of independent horror movies are set around working class people living in neighborhoods we're familiar with. But it's one of the great things about Stephen King and his work is we identify with all those people. We either are the people in his books or we know them. And we live in that neighborhood. His was a very working class bringing up. He and I were both brought up working class by divorced mothers. And so we share some of that experience, though mine was Los Angeles. His was rural Maine. So it was a little different.
A little different.
Yeah, just a
kind
little
of
bit.
opposite ends.
Yeah. But his characters eat at McDonald's, and he talks about brand names of things that we all consume, and
we eat a lot of McDonald's.
There you go. Yeah. I'm vegan, so I don't. But
it's just fascinating because I was thinking both before with the discussion of Hocus Pocus and him. I came aware of Hocus Pocus when I was still back in Italy. And in
You're from Italy?
Yes. I never told you. And back then, in Italy, Halloween was absolutely the only thing that we knew of from Halloween was through Charlie Brown and Peanuts.
Oh, really?
We had no
It's
idea.
the Great
what
Pumpkin, Charlie Brown.
Exactly, and we had no idea what the whole. Now, yes, they caught on, and especially.
You never trick or treated?
I never trick or treated.
Deprived. My God, dude, can you imagine?
Go now, man.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just ask a group of kids you can tag along.
Here's a bag.
It's 4:30 in the afternoon.
Staple this together into a bag here.
Yeah.
So there were all this, and the same Halloween by John Carpenter.
Yeah.
It was more known as Halloween, the Night of the Witches. So at least we could say, I know witch, but because the name Halloween, it didn't.
Wait, you superseded the season of the witch? Are you guys fortune
Yeah.
tellers?
How did you know?
Well, outside of the U.S., Halloween was not a thing. You know, there was Guy Fawkes Day in England, but that was the closest you could get to it. And I think it was Carpenter's movie more than anything that influenced Halloween being celebrated around the world.
Yeah, and it's and the same by the same token, if you will. When we were reading Stephen King in Italian, I realized that there were some reference to either American pop culture or something. They were completely lost because they didn't know that. So, and it was always treated because when you translate something, either you have to make a choice of saying, okay, should I use the equivalent, like the equivalent of McDonald's,
or be exact about it.
But then when you're reading it, you say Stephen King didn't write this.
Spaghetti.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I woke up and ate a plate of spaghetti. Spaghetti for lunch. Spaghetti. Wait a minute.
What the hell?
And so it was very. There are those passages that are still strident to this day. Then when I started reading in English, then I say, okay,
now I see.
remember.
I'm sorry, mister, I can't read.
Speaking of King, and this is one thing that if you can briefly say, how did Ghosts, Michael Jackson Ghost came about?
Did I scare you?
Because it has a terrific poker of a writer.
I just found out about this today. He
it,
dropped the names. I was like, wait, what? We have to ask about that.
Well, what you probably don't know is I directed for 2 weeks. I was the director on it. And Stephen King originally wrote the script, and Michael Jackson was starring in it. And King recommended me because of The Stand. And when we were in post-production on The Stand, I was going to shoot Ghosts while I was cutting the miniseries.
Oh, wow.
And the producer of the miniseries said he would sue me if I did that.
Oh.
So, but we were going to do it anyway, and we started shooting it. And we shot for 2 weeks when Michael's first scandal happened. So suddenly Michael disappeared. Nobody knew where he was. And Michael, and I had become very friendly during the course of this. And who knows what the truth of that scandal was. I know reasons to believe it and reasons to disbelieve it. I was never exposed to any reasons to believe it personally, but just from stories being told by the people involved. Who knows what his guilt was, but he disappeared. And we actually were going to shoot it in Japan. We shipped all the sets to Japan. We found out he had fled to Thailand, I guess it was. And it was just a mess. And before I was shooting The Shining, this was after 3 years, Michael would call me and say, we're going to finish it, it's going to be fantastic. And I said, Michael, working with Michael Jackson is like working on a clock painted by Salvador Dali.
Ooh, beautiful quote. Writer in me loves that. Mwah.
Yeah, chef's kiss. But there's not a clock that you can count on when you're working with Michael. The calendar is loosey-goosey. You just never know. And I go, I've got a start date on The Stand, or on The Shining, and I'm shooting that. That's my next project. And if we can't make that date, then you need to get a different director. And I recommended Stan Winston. They were already really good friends. Stan was a very good filmmaker, and Stan took over after I left it. And Stan had done all the effects on what
he was already involved in.
Yeah, exactly. And so we left on very friendly terms and all that, but I didn't get to finish it. But because of all those things going on, King had moved on. I did all the rewriting that was done, and then Stan got involved and changed it again. So I think King and I are the only two who get writing credit, or does Stan as well?
Both.
Stan also.
And also Michael Jackson.
As a writing credit too?
I think so. I
Maybe,
don't remember
yeah.
if it's screenplay by or story by.
Story by.
Maybe it's in story
Probably
by. There's
story
the four
by,
of you.
Yeah. So that's why I get credited as the screenwriter, because I had done a total rewrite after King left it, and I was continuing to direct it. And then I left it for obvious reasons. First, Michael did for 3 years, and then things got back on track.
So there is a huge gap during the work. I mean,
I started. There's not much of my footage left of it, but there's a lot of the beginning. And before it gets into the dance sequence where Michael is pounding the floor and pulls his mouth down, I shot all of those sequences. And, you know, the recreation of Frankenstein outside the mansion.
Yeah. But was it born from Stephen King or from Michael Jackson? What was the...
Michael Jackson contacted Stephen King.
Okay.
That's a hell of a team-up, man.
I want to do something really scary. Yeah.
That's a hell of a team-up.
Because it's not really a music video. It's an extravaganza. Is it something?
Well, it was going to be, originally, it was made for the end title song for Addams Family Values.
Oh, my God.
And then...
These factoids.
It was going to be like a $7 million video, which was huge. And once Michael got radioactive, the studio obviously pulled out of that immediately, and Michael said, no, this is going to be the most amazing video ever. We're going to do this, and I will pay for it out of pocket. It ended up, it wasn't going to be a 35-minute video. It was going to be a 15-minute video. And it ended up being a $15 million, everything but the kitchen sink, 35-minute video.
You're strange.
We now return to
MaJaMa.
Are you scared yet?
So we were at Michael calling Michael calling King about to set it up. It was
right. Yeah, it was Michael's idea, and then he contacted Stephen King and said, "I want to do the scariest music video ever." And after having been Thriller, and of course I was a zombie in Thriller.
How did that come to be?
My wife was as well. John Landis and I have been good friends.
I was going to say, it has to be the Landis connection.
And, you know, I knew all the makeup effects guys. Rick Baker was a close friend. And so my wife and I were asked if we wanted to be zombies. And I discovered I'm claustrophobic.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had my face cast done, but boy, it was not pleasant.
Every time I see those videos, I get paranoid too. I don't know if I could do it.
Yeah, I couldn't do it again.
Yeah.
Well, there's actually a scene in Maxine where Mia Goth is getting fitted for something, and she puts the goop on, and the person leaves her, and then she starts freaking out because she's better memories. But it's very effective. Like you said, every time I see it, I'm like, I don't know if I could. I'm glad you said that, because I'm like, I don't know if I could do that every time I see it. Like, we're just gonna put this on, just breathe. It sounds terrifying.
It took a while for me to get through it, and then I found out that Clint Eastwood also freaked out having it done, and I thought, okay.
Look, if Clint Eastwood freaked out, you're still a man, baby.
Yeah, I still have my testicles.
Exactly.
And is that the reason why I think in Tales of Halloween that you make a cameo also?
Oh,
you have a Phantom of the Opera
Phantom
mask?
Of the Opera
so it's only half.
Yeah, only half. So well, that wasn't why. But.
When you watch Thriller, you can point out that's me. That's my wife. That's amazing.
He's the one to the right.
Oh my God! Wait, you're not dancing? I'm just forget my ignorance. You're not dancing, are you?
No.
I was going to say that.
My wife was a dancer, but she's not a dancer. They had dancing zombies, background zombies, and close-up zombies. The close-up zombies had the most articulated makeups, and so my wife and I are close-up zombies.
You're the one. Also, you emerge from the ground.
I'm the last one to come out of the ground.
Dude, that's awesome.
And
to help the claustrophobia, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
We know you're already pissed about the makeup. Can you just get someone to shovel the dirt on Nick, please?
And inside the house, I'm right on Michael's right side, and Cynthia's on his left side.
So they're both okay. I didn't know about your wife.
I got to ask, just because Thriller, one might make the argument that is it's hard to label something this, but the most iconic thing frigging ever. When you're there shooting, I know Michael was already a star, but like, is it just like, okay, we got to get the shoot done, or is there a vibe of like, holy crap, I think something is happening here?
It was
like,
really special. Nobody ever imagined that to this day, 30-some years later, that it would be the most successful music video of all time. But we knew it was special, and we knew Michael was special. I remember watching Landis shooting the scene where it's him and Ola Ray just walking, and Michael's telling her the story and trying to scare her and stuff, and it's just one dolly shot and the two of them are walking and talking. And then he starts doing his moves and dancing, and it was like he was electric. Once the camera was rolling and action, Michael was electrical. And once it was a cut, it was like this gentle little kitten going, "How was it, John?" You know? But, and he was the sweetest guy and generous. Just, you know, it's really heartbreaking what happened to him.
But is it true also that he had a very weird sense of humor?
Well, he was easily embarrassed by naughty stuff, and scared by scary stuff. And I would tease him with slightly off-color jokes at times, and he'd go, "Oh,
this is adorable." All right, well, I think we're wrapping up here, but I would like to ask, we were talking about horror in the theater this year. Have you, anything you've seen that you really loved, anything that stood out to Mr. Mick Garris in the horror world this year?
Just Strange Darling, which I liked a lot.
I was trying to get them to see that. I don't know if I was even suggesting if we finished early tonight. I've heard going blind to that if you're going to go in. Like,
don't see
don't
any
look
trailers.
At anything.
Don't. Yeah, it's you've got to see it blind, or it'll be ruined for you.
That's what I've heard.
And Oddity I liked.
I didn't see Oddity.
You know, the Late Night with the Devil I think is spectacular. And there's been a lot of good stuff.
Dude, it's so great.
All been independent.
I work at a movie theater, and my boss was telling me the night that Late Night premiered, he was like, dude, I just keep adding on more. Again, to my question about you of the actual strong performance, our theater is like a ghost town, but I remember that day my big manager of the store was like, I keep adding on showings because they keep selling out.
Oh, good.
So,
well, that's great.
I'm telling you, look, I see it every day, and the theater is a ghost town. Even when there's a big movie, that it kind of comes in waves.
Which theater is it?
AMC 16, the one down in Burbank with the big steps up there.
I go to the Universal City.
Yes, more fancier than us. But our theater is apparently the highest grossing, but I'm like, other theaters have more of a
but they're
prestige.
not all recliners.
Yeah, man, what's up with that?
See, he says it too. Everyone says that to me. They're like, "What? If you go to the 6 or the 8, which are smaller theaters, they all recline." I don't want to bore you with insider
Same with
AMC
Universal
knowledge.
City.
Yeah.
Yep, they all recline.
So, you know, I see.
Boycott AMC.
Yeah.
Hashtag boycott AMC. Wait, I work. So yeah, dude, I see a ghost town, and it depresses me as a movie nerd. But yeah, like I said, he had to add shows for Devil. So I feel like horror, if anything, other than like the big mega can't misses, is keeps chugging along.
Yeah, it's great. I do go to the 6 and the 8 usually program the more offbeat stuff.
Yes, he knows. They do program the more offbeat stuff.
Yeah.
How cool is that? And yes, stuff usually thrives there. Like if we pick one of the A24 kind of culty ones, kind of horror-y. I saw the TV Glow was almost exclusively at the 6, and yeah, it was doing very well there. So it's been nice to see horror-esque offerings finding these pockets where they can actually thrive, especially in these times of the industry seeming to just not be able to play catch-up. So
and they're so willing to go into streaming so quickly after the theatrical window that they're getting the audience used to that. So they're preparing an audience not to go to theaters anymore. And they're shooting themselves in the head.
Maybe you'll listen when he says it, because that's my point. I'm like, dude, how you can't prep them. They're going to be like, look, give it 2 weeks, it'll be home. I won't have to pay the money. And I understand it's expensive as hell, but you're like you said, you're literally training them. Don't worry. In fact, to your point, Tom Cruise was adamant about not having Maverick go to streaming for a long time. It played the whole summer. It made like $700 million. It was the 5th highest grossing of all time. So yes, you see, Mick said it. Now you need to listen. So.
And I'm rarely right.
So guys, I believe we are wrapping up here. I would like to give an amazing thanks to our first ever guest, Mick Garris, because make no mistake, this is the most objectively interesting discussion that's ever been on this couch.
Yes.
Thank you for swinging by, Mick.
I think we've peaked.
I think we've peaked, and we're going to stop the show. We won't be back next week.
Might as well. I did it with my podcast.
You'll get the three of us just blah, blah, blah. It won't be as interesting again, but please check out Mick Garris's Postmortem on YouTube if you love
All the episodes there?
Not so much on YouTube, but they are on Apple Podcasts.
Oh, I saw a playlist with like everything. I don't know where I was looking, but
Well, maybe they are on there, but the Postmortem with Mick Garris TV series that started it are all on YouTube.
Okay, maybe that's what I was watching then.
Yeah, they're
Either
only
way,
10 of
check out
those.
Postmortem. He's got a ton of horror people on there. And check out everything Mick Garris has done. Check out that Shining remake, you know. He's got a ton of stuff. The guy is a master of horror, as like the TV show series. So, Mick, once again, thank you. And guys, from our couch to yours, this has been a spectacular, above average Jams.
MaJaMa.
There'd be one body with three heads poking each other in the eyes.
I knew that there was something that it was bothering.
Yeah, the fact that you weren't recording it.
Yes. It could happen to anybody, except for
well,
just me.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Not a union crew.
No.